I want to talk in this video, pardon me, I want to talk in this video about how a newspaper is an ethical contract, and how a website of news, or Opinews, depending on your opinion, right, is not a ethical contract. So, what is a newspaper? A newspaper is, it's a pamphlet of community community event notification, communal system, communal system, communal system keeping. So, for example, you have your classifieds, that shows all the jobs that are being promoted to be filled, and you have obituaries, all the people who have died, in your community. Now, and of course you have other stuff in the newspaper as well. Sometimes you have, TV guides for local channels, but you can obviously recognize how a news website is not the same as a newspaper. And but there is there has been, and still is, what I would term a negative progression happening, with diminishing readerships of newspapers, and higher readership of these news websites. Now, what this means is that people, the average Joe and the average Jane, of every class, unless we're talking about some very small rural community that could aptly be called a village, generally speaking, the average Jane and average Joe of every class is not taking participation in the ethical contract that was/is the newspaper. They're not taking participation in that, and this is problematic. First, because the newspaper, it helps condition the social system of any community due to its readership. So diminishing readership of a newspaper, of newspapers, is a dysfunction of the community. And this is why common sense nowadays is so uncommon, right? You look at these offshoot factions creating, divisions of politics and politics in, every area. You've got, vegans versus meat eaters. You've got gay versus straight, or cisgender versus transgender, whatever. Black versus white, obviously, that's uh, the forerunner exempling itself right now, from what I can gather from the news. And and you've got, of course, men versus women, and the outfits of MGTOW versus third wave, et cetera, et cetera. You get my point, okay? Um, so common sense is pretty uncommon. It's pretty uncommon, and that's due in big part to the absence of readership for communal newspapers, right? The readerships, is diminishing, because, and I want to make one thing pretty clear, okay? And that is that a readership is not who purchases a newspaper, who has a subscription to a newspaper. A readership, is a body of people who actually read the newspaper, and that is diminishing. That that is that is that has been diminishing, and is continually diminishing. And this brings up the topic of that was coined by Norm Macdonald of fake news. Fake news is rampant online. On news websites, it's all about clickbait, and there's more competition, for eyes, for attention, and it's basically created this attention whore culture. And you look at you look at the nature of Opinews, what Denzel Washington refers to as Opinews, and I think he's apt in calling it that. Online, you look at these news websites online, and how their content is being used. It's primarily not being used to it's not being used to be as material to read, so much as it's being used as material to create trend, and basically it's just being used it's being used in trend creation, meme creation, this sort of these sorts of things. And it's very problematic for the maintenance of a civilization, because the maintenance of any civilization depends on the maintenance of the communities they're in. And it's problematic, for a generation to be programmed, and I say programmed rather than raised, because I think that's really what's occurring nowadays, is that the younger generations are being programmed. I think it's alarming, disconcerting that younger and younger generations are being programmed to gather from different areas what has historically been located in one area, the newspaper, right? Nowadays, people are going to, they're going to Craigslist to look for their jobs, and they're going to, they're going to different domains online to look for the things that you could have in the old days found in one source. And the problem with this, and I think, anybody who's smart, who's watching this, and who's thinking along the same lines, the problem with this, the problem with Opinews online is that the obituaries, the births, that are, are printed in newspapers, online, nobody is really focusing on the births. Nobody is really focusing on the obituaries. People are becoming more fragmented in terms of interperson and interpersonality, and so people are becoming more and more divided, and it's not so good, objectively speaking. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that. How the newspaper is an ethical contract, and online opinion news websites, they can't be an ethical contract, and they fragment your concentration. They fragment your input, and thus fragmenting your output. And people keep on talking online about the rise in narcissism. I think that the switch from the ethical contract of newspapers to the zero ethical contract of opinion news online websites, I think that's responsible. Anyway, it's something to think about. Have a good day. Peace, meow.